Today's session is all about agent-based file transfer, but more importantly, it's about the reality most organizations are living right now. So across industries, we're seeing large-scale modernization and digital transformation initiatives. So cloud applications are being adopted rather quickly for analytics, customer experience, core business systems, but at the same time, legacy systems are not going away anytime soon. And that means most teams are operating in a hybrid world by necessity, not necessarily by choice. And in this reality, file workflows often become the connective tissue. So the thing that has to work reliably across the old and the new, or the cloud and the on-prem, internal systems and external partners. What we'll show today is how Progress Automate MFT is designed specifically for that world. So a model where orchestration is centralized in the cloud, but execution happens where it makes sense. So close to the data within the right security and network boundaries. And this approach doesn't require a big bang transformation. It supports modernization as it actually happens. So incrementally over time, while reducing risk, operational friction, and dependency on some slow monolithic file transfer architectures. So here's how we're going to spend our time together. First, we'll talk about the challenges of these distributed file workflows and why they've become harder to manage over time. Then we'll define what agent-based file transfer actually means in practical, non-theoretical terms. And then from there, we'll walk through Automate MFT agent types and deployment models, including when to use Progress-hosted agents versus self-hosted agents, or both. And then finally, we'll wrap up with looking ahead at where Automate MFT is going. So let's take a step back and talk about why file transfer has become a persistent challenge. And the core issue isn't file movement itself, it's that data is fundamentally distributed. So files live across different cloud platforms, legacy on-premise systems, IT, OT environments, and external partners. And that reality creates a lot of friction across industries. So we talk to customers in financial services where file workflows often span core banking systems and fraud platforms, clearinghouse partners, and regulatory reporting systems. So files have to move on strict schedules and SLAs. And if one transfer is delayed or missed, downstream processes break. And the business impact shows up as settlement delays, reporting risk, and fire drills for IT. We talk to customers in manufacturing and energy where data has to move across plants and different field sites. You have those OT environments, and then you have some centralized systems at the headquarters as well. So files need to move out of a plant, but those don't allow inbound connections. And that creates constant tension between operational needs and security policies, and monolithic systems really struggle to respect these boundaries. So from a business perspective, this creates friction that shows up as missed SLAs, delayed processes, could be compliance risk, and really just slowed innovation for these businesses. So file workflows are often mission critical, but they're really invisible until something breaks. And then everyone has to get involved. So for IT teams, distributed data creates a lot of operational drag, and teams have to spend time maintaining really brittle scripts, troubleshooting network issues, responding to audit requests, and working around architectural constraints instead of actually improving or modernizing the workflows that they have. And when visibility is fragmented, IT can also end up being reactive instead of proactive. So most of these challenges actually trace back to the same root cause, and that is that monolithic file transfer architectures just really weren't designed for today's distributed world that we live in today. To understand why agent-based architecture matters, it helps to be pretty explicit about what we mean by a monolithic approach, because this can actually be several different versions. So monolithic file transfer isn't just one thing, it can be a few different patterns. But the first involves some sort of centralized execution hub. And in this model, all file transfers are funneled through a single centralized server or platform. So every file, regardless of where it originates or where it needs to go, has to pass through that centralized hub. And so what this can do is create network bottlenecks. It can cause latency and performance issues if you have a peak in files. It can also cause unnecessary data movement across network boundaries. So thinking about that manufacturing example, or an example where we have data residency issues and data has to move via files to that centralized location. Another common approach in this kind of monolithic model is script-based sprawl. So often the precursor or a supplement to these monolithic systems are scripts. And the problem is that scripts over time tend to grow in length. They become really long little monsters. They multiply and they rely on tribal knowledge or heroes in the IT estate. And so that leads to a lot of fragility as well as some silent failures, a lack of consistency for audit trails, and then high operational risk when people leave. So these approaches share the same flaw. They assume that this execution has to be centralized. But in a highly distributed world, centralizing execution just increases the risk instead of reducing it. So agent-based architecture actually flips this model. Instead of forcing data to move the orchestration layer, you move the orchestration to the data where it exists. So what changes is you have centralized control that stays in the cloud where you want it. You have execution that happens locally where your data actually lives. And then you still have that visibility and audit trail in that centralized location across these different environments. So for the business, this reduces risk, it increases reliability, and it makes it easier to scale on demand. So workflows run closer to the systems that they actually depend on, changes are easier to make, and compliance teams get much clearer audit trails. And for IT teams, this agent-based architecture means a lot less network gymnastics, fewer brittle integrations that they have to manage, and more control with less effort. So you're no longer redesigning architecture every time the business adds a new partner or a new cloud service. You're simply extending the system by deploying agents where they're needed. And once you understand this kind of shift to this agent-based architecture, this centralized control with local execution, the role of Automate MFT agents really become clear. So at this point, we've talked about kind of why traditional monolithic file transfer models really struggle in this kind of modern distributed environment. And I think the next question that a lot of customers that we speak to is, what does this actually look like in practice? And so to walk us through that, I'm going to be handing this over to Tony, and he's going to start by really grounding us in what an MFT agent from Automate MFT is, and how we think about agents with real customer environments.
Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, so I mean, well, what exactly is a MFT agent? I mean, for starters, they're extremely lightweight. So unlike, say, deploying and managing one of the monolithic systems that Rachel was talking about, where you're going to have to do upgrades and patching and all of that, with agents, because you want to be able to distribute them and run multiples of them. They are, extremely lightweight, and once deployed, don't really require any ongoing carrying and feeding. I kind of think of it as like a, headless worker bee, right? Where it's just, it's sitting there, it's doing its job, but it itself doesn't have any user interface, any management or configuration even until it gets all that from the until it gets it all from the control plane. So I mean, and then specific with Automate MFT agents is that they are available to run on both Windows and Linux. So whichever is your preference, and you can mix and match if you want Windows in one environment and you want a Linux agent in another environment, you're certainly able to do that. kind of the key topic here is that they're controlled and managed from the cloud. So the agents themselves don't do anything other than connect back up to the automated MFT control plane. But then that's where they get their configuration from and basically their instructions of, what sort of file transfers they should carry out. And everything's done, security is a top priority because these agents are going to have a lot of capabilities, a lot of access to different internal systems, your partner systems, your cloud systems, and so forth. So everything is, heavily encrypted. Making sure that that agent is only controlled by your control plane.
Awesome. Yeah, so that's kind of what an agent is and the role that it plays. But I think next is how does it all fit together? So can you walk us through a little bit about the architecture and what that centralized orchestration and distributed execution actually looks like?
I could certainly try. I mean, definitely a visual is always helpful. So, okay, great. So here, what we're looking at, kind of build this as we go. So it all starts with the control plane, as I call it, or basically the management console. So that's all running up in the cloud, managed by Progress. So literally, you just point your browser to the URL for whichever environment you're deployed on and authenticate, and then you can get down to work setting up your automated file transfer workflows. And so there's really two flavors of agents then that you'll be able to utilize to execute tasks. The first shown here is a progress hosted agent. And as the name implies, these two are hosted by us. They're independent from the console and the control plane, basically lightweight containers that Automate MFT will spin up, run a task on, and then tear down. So an agent is, the lifespan of an agent is very short, really just for that one task. And you can see that it's, the connection between the management console and the agent is just for management purposes and for log data. And then it's the agent that's able to orchestrate the file movements between, what are called endpoints. And so here it's showing that the progress hosted agent, basically it's going to have access to public endpoints. And so those can include anything accessible on the public internet, uh, that you have permissions to, and you can use open standard protocols for different endpoints like FTPS, SFTP, HTTPS. You've got S3 buckets. You know, uh, Basically, SharePoint Online. So yeah, the progress hosted agent is one option for you to run tasks, but then the other is a self-hosted agent. So the self-hosted agents are what you can uh, through the console deploy to Windows or Linux. And so self-hosted agents then would, run and deploy behind your firewall. And then they can have access not only to the public endpoints, but also to private endpoints that, also reside behind your firewall. So the type of endpoints don't necessarily change. There are some things like mainframe systems or network shares that are typically only accessible on the private. But yeah, basically those are the two different types of agents, and then the similarities are that they all use high security. Uh, they're scalable, which I think we're going to cover in a little bit more detail later on, how you can scale out The agents, they're all going to kick their logs back to the management console. So regardless of where and on what type of agent your task executes on, you'll have that one place to go and view the audit logs and essentially the results, um, of running that task. So Rachel, hopefully that helps provide a little bit of a visual to what we've been talking about so far.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the natural next question that people ask in customers that we speak to is, how do I decide which agent to use, progress hosted versus self-hosted, or do I use both? How do I decide?
Yeah, great question. So, the long and short of it is that you can use both. There's like a lot of things. There's pros and cons to each of the different types of agents. So with the progress hosted agents, I mean, they're literally, zero footprint, right? I mean, like I said, they get spun up, they get used, and they get tore down. That all happens automatically. So that's just, that's entirely managed by the, um, by the by Automate MFT, basically. Nothing you need to do. That means that there's zero maintenance either, even though self-hosted agents have minimal maintenance. The progress hosted agents have zero. So they're really ideal when all of your orchestrations, or at least the orchestrations you want to run on a progress hosted agent, are only need to push to or from or pull from public endpoints, and you just want that to run completely SaaS, completely up in the cloud. The self-hosted agents, those you can deploy on your own infrastructure because, as we discussed, that's going to be sitting, behind your firewall. So it's going to be your infrastructure, your Windows or Linux server. So they're not entirely zero maintenance. You obviously need to keep that infrastructure and that OS patched. But as far as the agent itself, they're all self-updating. So unless you change the defaults and specify that you don't want the agents to automatically update, or maybe you want them to update at a particular time, they'll just automatically update when a new version of Automate MFT is released. And so these are really ideal for a number of different use cases. Anytime you need to be able to access endpoints behind your firewall. Also, you might have some very secure environments, isolated networks that you want to orchestrate file movements between, and you don't want that data to ever leave that network. So using an agent on that network will accomplish that. So I mean, kind of to summarize, when to choose a progress hosted agent is just when you want it to be as low touch as possible, and all your endpoints are public. And then for tasks where, among other things, if one of the endpoints is behind a firewall, then you would definitely choose to use a self-hosted agent for that. But the key is you don't have to choose one or the other. You can use both, and as I think we'll show a little later, you can easily take a task and change it too. It's not like any sort of permanent decision you need to make.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Tony. And really just to underscore all the points that you just made, that flexibility to use either agent and kind of flip it later, make an agent pool later down the road. All of that is intentional. You're not meant to commit to one or the other when you get started with Automate MFT. So just a little bit of a closer look at how this process works to get up and running. It is really easy to get started with agents and get these deployed. Like Tony said, they are very lightweight services. So at a high level, the key idea here is you deploy execution where it makes sense, but you manage everything centrally. So getting agents deployed where they're needed, Again, like Tony said, automatically in the cloud or on premises where you want them to interact with the data. So again, it doesn't lock you into anything architecture wise. And then next, similar to that architecture slide, all that logic does live centrally. So you will create the actual task workflows, your schedules for when they execute, credentials and policies, all of that is made in the management console. So that's where you have that consistency and governance across all of your tasks. And you can easily modify things along the way. So you don't have to rebuild a full workflow for every environment. It's really easy to change it once in that management console. And then as tasks run, agents execute locally, either on premises behind that firewall or in the cloud using the agent type that you assigned for that task. And then from there, the visibility flows back to that centralized view. So the logs with the audit data, the management data all flows back, where similarly your credentials, your policies all are. So it's all in one place. So if somebody ever asks you what happened to that file, IT has a really clear, defensible response that they can refer to. And finally, you can scale really easily. It's super straightforward. Basically, as your needs change, if something happens to spike your needs, you have a new partner to onboard, you have a new site or location, you can easily deploy a new agent just as those needs come along, or you can pool agents for that added resiliency. So the architecture really grows with you as you need it on demand, rather than some of the monolithic approaches that require a little bit more work and planning to maybe add disaster recovery or some added resiliency or load balancing. So what this means for some of the customers that we speak to every day, and what I want to also cover is this almost seems like we've talked a lot about the file transfer mechanics, but this really does change how businesses can actually operate today with their workflows. And kind of going back to the start, very few teams are starting from a clean state. So most organizations are modernizing incrementally. So they are moving parts of their business to SaaS or cloud platforms, but they still have these critical legacy systems that they really can't rip out. And file transfer does have to be that connective tissue between both. And I see this a lot when we speak to healthcare and life sciences organizations. So teams are modernizing those patient-facing systems and those analytics platforms, but they still have legacy on-prem systems for core operations. So agents allow that sensitive healthcare data moves securely between those modern cloud EHR platforms and the legacy systems, without weakening security posture or auditability or visibility. In financial services, modernization often means cloud fraud platforms, SaaS analytics tools, or partner APIs layered on top of some long-standing core banking systems. So agent-based execution lets those systems coexist while files continue to move across maybe regulatory and partner boundaries, and get to the endpoint that they need to. There's a lot of SLAs in financial services. In manufacturing and energy, modernization often looks like adopting some cloud analytics or monitoring platforms, but on site in the field, you have a lot of OT systems and plants that remain firmly on-prem. So agents really respect those boundaries and allow data to move outward securely, even when inbound access is pretty restricted and locked down. So then lastly, in retail and logistics, modernization tends to be pretty constant. So new channels, new warehouses, new partners. So an agent model supports a lot of this dynamic change that's rather constant without hurting or destabilizing some of the existing workflows. So from a business perspective, this means modernization doesn't have to hurt or pause operations. Your file workflows remain reliable. And for IT teams, this model removes a lot of architectural friction. So a lot of these modernization examples with that monolithic approach means a lot of projects for the IT team to re-architect the IT workflows, but it's much simpler with this agent-based execution. So you can stay in control, security teams still get the audit control or audit trails that they need, and the business can continue operating those critical workflows. And so with this context, I'm going to pass it back over to Tony to kind of give you an example of what this looks like in product, deploying agents, and then seeing what those log data looks like when it comes back to the product.
Yep, just getting logged on here to Automate MFT. You may have noticed there, I just put in my email address and click log on. So I do have this environment tied into a single sign-on. So that's a nice feature, makes it very simple to authenticate. I'm going to go ahead and jump over here to agents since that's the topic of the hour here. So this is basically where you're able to deploy and manage your agents. Now you won't see any of the Progress hosted agents here because those are managed automatically. So this is going to be self-hosted agents and agent pools. Basically, if you need to add a new agent, let's say you want to deploy a new Windows agent somewhere, you can just go in here, click new agent, just give it a name. Here's those settings I touched on earlier where you can change the behavior for when that agent will update. And here, if you know right away that you want to add it into a pool, you can select a pool. Otherwise, just leave that and click on save. And then really the deployment is a simple matter of downloading and expanding the zip file. And then you'll, run basically run the agent for the first time with this registration key, which will connect it up to your environment and register it. And then it'll show like these other ones as being registered. Go ahead and delete that. So that's how easy it is to deploy a new agent. Pretty similar if you want to create a new pool, you can just go in and give it a pool and select what agents you want to be as part of that pool. And then when the agents are in a pool, when you assign a task to use that agent pool, it'll just automatically run on whichever one of those agents it chooses. So that can scale as well as provide redundancy. So the way you do that, if we now go over here to our tasks, and I'm just going to pick this one, which as far as what the task does, this is a pretty typical task that's going to go out and download files from an external vendor's SFTP site and save them to a SharePoint site, and then maybe save a backup copy to an Azure Blob. But you'll notice down here, it's listing the agent, and this is just assigned to one of my agents that's deployed and running on Windows up in Azure. So let's say that I wanted to change that to either Progress hosted agent, which I could do, or maybe I want to change it to my Azure agent pool. And then that way, if one of those agents isn't available, the other one will be available. So reassigning the task reassigning the agent, sorry, that a task will run on um, is really just that simple. And then, like we touched on, everything about that task running and what it did is available right here in the control plane as well. So if I look at the activity for that task, and I can see here that it ran successfully, right from this centralized control plane, if I want to get some maybe, low level debug information about what that task run, I can bring up this task run log. Or if I'm really just trying to track down and take a look at the file activity, I can see here in a tabular format, exactly what files this task downloaded, where those files were uploaded to, that it went back and deleted the original. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a visual to go along with some of the slides that we've been talking to. Rachel, anything else we want to touch on, or should I flip it back over to you?
No, that was perfect. Yeah, I will take it back over and I will just go over the last item we had on the agenda. So thank you, Tony. I do want to spend just a few minutes kind of looking ahead at Automate MFT and how it's evolving. One of the biggest differences between Automate MFT and some traditional, maybe more monolithic file transfer platforms is really just how quickly the capabilities can get into your hands. So historically, file transfer products tend to evolve pretty slowly. There's maybe major releases. Then there's on top of that long upgrade projects on the customer side, maybe some risk-heavy maintenance windows, but really many teams delay upgrades altogether. And so this means not only do you not get the latest and greatest functionalities, but there's also security improvements that customers are behind on. And so Automate MFT is really built differently since it is a cloud native SaaS platform. Releases really are constant. And so this means really shorter feedback loops, faster delivery of the capabilities that you yourselves are requesting, and then less disruption for you and your team. So modernization is less about this kind of big bang event. It's more continuous improvement. This timeline, those visuals, just to kind of help make it a little bit more clear. Over just a few months, you can see since we released Automate MFT in October, we've delivered incremental improvements that are compounding over time. And this pace matters because it directly addresses one of the biggest pain points of monolithic systems being slow innovation and disruptive upgrades. So with Automate MFT, you get that new functionality as part of the service without forcing your team into a long upgrade cycle or revalidation exercise. And so you get the features sooner, you're able to adapt faster and stay aligned with what is the latest from file transfer. And so just looking ahead, I want to give you a little insight on where we've been and where we're going. So rather than kind of running through a laundry list of features, just organize this into a few core themes that align with the challenges that we see with our customers. So everything really ladders up to enterprise security and governance, lower cost and higher productivity, and then centralizing real world workflows across hybrid environments. So starting with security and governance, this is really the foundation of managed file transfer and enterprise environments. So recently we've delivered capabilities like improved role-based access control, as well as single sign-on. This really just makes it easier to align Automate MFT to enterprise identity standards that our customers have for IT and security teams. This reduces a lot of friction during access reviews. It simplifies onboarding and it really tightens your ability to control access within the system, especially if multiple teams or partners are sharing workflows. And then looking ahead, you'll continue to see advancements like this moving forward, but also some improvements to log retention will be coming out very soon, and then some built-in key and certificate generation, really to reduce operational overhead even further. So theme here is really just how can we continue to make this product as secure as possible, but also make it as simple to use as possible. The second theme is lowering operational cost while improving productivity. And this actually loops in really nicely with that agent-based execution. And recently we've delivered features like agent pooling that we just went over. We added custom scripting to the product. We've added more ways to simplify task configuration, make it even more intuitive, really to reduce the day-to-day effort required to manage all these different tasks. So agent pooling in particular, it also improves resiliency and throughput without requiring additional infrastructure. So something that's very hard to achieve in those monolithic platforms. And then looking forward, one of the big themes that we have is around reporting and observability. So the ability to provide you and your teams with faster insight with less manual effort, and getting that to you through pre-bill as well as custom reports. So really the net effect here would be fewer fire drills, less brittle scripts that are outside of the platform, and more time spent really just improving the workflows that you have instead of babysitting them. And the final theme is about centralizing these real world workflows. So this is really about being that connective tissue between the legacy systems and the cloud systems and supporting modernization as it happens. So some recent delivered capabilities are some of the new endpoint connectors like SharePoint that we introduced in Q1, adding support for a REST API, and then some operational guardrails as well. So really making it easier to integrate these modern cloud services with those on-prem. You'll continue to see, aside from these two that are the first ones that you'll see added, you'll continue to see more and more endpoint connectors. So OneDrive and Google Cloud Storage are first on the docket. They'll be coming, but you'll see more and more added over the coming months. And then improving that S3 endpoint connector as well. So each release, really, we want to make it easier to adapt these workflows that you have, and allow you to create more workflows based off of the applications and the data lakes that you already have in your estate. So really going back, the roadmap reinforces the value props that we've been talking about here: faster access to new capabilities, lower operational friction, and centralized control with that flexible execution. If there's one thing that you take away from today, it is that Automate MFT is built for real world pace of modernization where legacy and cloud systems coexist in the modern IT estate. And change happens continuously. And the fastest way that you can see impact is through a conversation with our team tailored to your environment. So if you would like to set up a call with our team, or you would like to learn more about Automate MFT, we would love to continue this conversation. So we're going to be sending out a survey where you can indicate you would like to set up some time with our team to speak about Automate MFT. So look out for that. And then you can always request a demo or a trial on progress.com/automatemft. But I want to thank you so much for joining us today. And we're looking forward to more conversations in the future. So thank you for attending, everyone.